Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to the second of the return of the Chamber lunches. As you can see, it's another sellout. I think it must be the attraction of the speaker. More about him in just a few moments' time. Before all of that, though, just to make you aware that this is or tries to be a COVID-safe event. If you came to the last lunch, you'll have heard all of this before, but there is hand sanitizing. There is a QR code, which I think is on your menus, so you can register. And we also have, obviously, you now seated, which is what we needed to do in order that this wasn't a standing event. Thank heavens for that. Be mindful of shaking hands and social greetings. Probably a little bit late for that now, but if you still insist on kissing, this is a hotel. Rooms are available. We are indeed going to have ourselves an excellent lunch, and we're looking forward to that, so I won't delay you too much more, but to introduce you to the President of the Jersey Chamber of Commerce, and that is Jennifer Carnegie.
Thanks, Murray. Good afternoon, everybody. Fantastic to see a sellout here this afternoon. Transport, whether by air or sea, is our lifeline. It brings us the food we eat, the materials we need to build things, and the fuel that powers our cars. It also gives us a significant choice of airport destinations that would be the envy of almost every other small island jurisdiction around. If you live in Gibraltar, for example, at the moment you can fly to 7 UK destinations. 3 of those are London. Last Sunday, as we move out of the tourist season, the Isle of Man had 5 flights to 4 destinations. And Bermuda had currently got flights to 6 destinations. Jersey has 22 flights departing to 14 destinations serviced by 4 carriers. This connectivity helps drive our economy, making us more favourable than the competition, as well as providing a better quality of life for everybody here. But we should not be complacent. Airlines and ferry companies require passengers to turn a profit against tight margins and absolutely ruthless competition. We stand at the cusp of a significant imbalance in our economy that threatens to jeopardise this connectivity. Many members here will know the adage of the Jersey economy is a 3-legged stool comprising finance, tourism and agriculture. If one of those legs becomes very frail, the stool ultimately will fall. Whilst our finance industry continues to perform strongly, the same cannot be said for our tourism industry. It's been hammered by COVID. So already we are seeing hotels that are being turned into housing. The Mayfair, the Savoy and the Hampshire are examples. It's obvious, but tourism generates much of the passenger demand to and from the island, and reduction in hotel capacity flows through to a reduction in passenger demand. Why should this matter to us, to businesses, to our average resident? Because our connectivity is our lifeblood. It's our competitive advantage and a marked advantage for quality of life. We've got to try and avoid the vicious circle of reducing passenger numbers, causing increased fares with fewer passengers still, and ultimately the loss of flights and ferry services. The loss of connectivity could and will have a disastrous knock-on effect for our economy here in Jersey. Whilst government is engaged in developing a tourism strategy, our stool metaphor tells us that even more than tourism is at stake here. Shrinking tourism, or a tourism sector that's unable to function because of lack of staff, will have an impact on residents and businesses. It's already started. Matt Thomas and his team at the ports of Jersey have managed the storm of COVID and placed us in a good recovery position for our air services. They've handled the difficulties with our ferry services with patience and skill. Whilst they've done a brilliant job at maintaining our connectivity as we exit COVID, we need business and government to work together to fully understand these dependencies and approach the challenges facing our tourist industry with some urgency. Now, a very reputable person in the travel industry in Jersey said, Matt Thomas knows his stuff. If Matt's worried about something, we should all be worried about something. So we're very much looking to hear what Matt's worried about after lunch here today. So we thank you for your continued support of the lunch, another sellout, as Murray said, and to that of our sponsors that we couldn't do without. Our supplier sponsors, OSIF Marketing and Advertising for the video, Cooper & Co. for the coffee, and Donnell's for the superb wine. Enjoy your lunch. Our main sponsor today, which is Kerry Olsen, and Kerry Olsen have fantastic credentials. They support and advise 9 out of the 10 of the world's largest banks and private equity companies. They have 62 partners. They have 250 lawyers. They have 500 employees across 9 international offices here. We're absolutely delighted and thrilled that they've sponsored the lunch today. And I'd like to invite Chris Philpott up to say a few words.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. And on behalf of Kerry Olsen, we're delighted to be sponsoring this Chamber of Commerce lunch today. It is fantastic to see so many people in the same room. And thank you all very much for supporting this event. In fact, this is only the second lunch that Chamber have been able to hold since March 2020. Hopefully things will continue moving in the right direction and we will be able to enjoy many more in the months ahead. These lunches really are an excellent forum for local businesses to engage with politicians and key stakeholders in our island. And being able to hold such events and supporting them is especially important as we enter an election year. So a little bit of background about our speaker today. Matt Thomas, Group Chief Executive Officer of Ports of Jersey. Matt joined Ports of Jersey as Group CEO in July 2019, bringing significant international experience in the operation, development and financing of major infrastructure companies. Before moving to Jersey, he was CEO of the Shannon Group, the primary catalyst for economic development in the west of Ireland, incorporating airport, tourism, property and aerospace companies. Before moving to Ireland, Matt was based in Manhattan, leading the €4 billion privatisation of LaGuardia Airport in his role of CEO of Vantage Airport Group. He was involved in the majority of Vantage's 30 airport projects across 4 continents, as well as being a director of a number of airports within the Vantage portfolio, including Nassau in the Bahamas, Montego Bay in Jamaica, and Santiago in Chile. A qualified accountant, having trained in investment banking, Matt has also held senior management positions at Vancouver Airport, Liverpool John Lennon Airport, Copenhagen Airport and Newcastle Airport. Before I hand the floor to Matt, whilst all of us in this room, both personally and professionally, have been hugely affected by this global pandemic, I've been lucky enough to work with Matt and his team at Ports over the last 18 months. It is fair to say that they have been at the coalface of this crisis in managing and adapting the island's vital gateways during such a difficult time. Add to that global supply chain issues, Brexit ramifications. I'm not sure that many people have experienced their first few years in Jersey against such a backdrop. Please help me in giving a very warm welcome to our speaker today, Mr. Matt Thomas.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris, and thanks, Jennifer, for the kind introduction earlier. I must admit, it feels a bit weird having eyes looking at you again, but give it best shot. I was due to speak at the Chamber lunch in April last year, but COVID-19 had some other ideas. The pandemic managed something that the global financial crisis didn't: 9/11, SARS, 2 Gulf Wars, and every other geopolitical event of the last 50 years. It turned the travel sector and our lives completely upside down. I thought I'd use my time today to share some experiences from the last 18 months before turning to the future and the sizable opportunities and challenges ahead of us as we work out what a post-pandemic world will look like. In A Tale of Two Cities, Dickens, my favourite book, described the year 1775 as the best of times and the worst of times, the season of light and the season of darkness, the spring of hope and the winter of despair. I think this is a pretty good description of the last 18 months, a time of one of the most exciting, exhilarating, energising and heartwarming, but at the same time heart-wrenching, exhausting and difficult periods of my career. I can actually pinpoint the moment the roller coaster ride began for us. It was around 6 o'clock on the 2nd of March in 2020 when I received a call from the Civil Aviation Authority to say Flybe was about to go into administration. Now, moments like that, and it's not my first rodeo, there's a crazy game of cat and mouse. Airlines desperately try to ensure that none of their aircraft are on the ground, while we airports desperately try to put a fire engine, a snowplow, or any other inanimate object we can find to block the aircraft until our bills have been paid. Credit to Flybe, they timed the run well, and we were left with a bad debt, and 30% of the island's air connectivity had gone in a heartbeat. They were the first airline casualty of the pandemic. Now, in normal times, the demise of Flybe would have dominated our lives at the ports for months, if not years. In reality, it was overtaken by events within a week. As the pandemic took hold, I gathered our management team together, and I should say, I feel a little bit like Jonah, that emergency situations have followed me around the world, so I promised I didn't cause the pandemic. But it's not the first time, and the one thing that I can really remember as clear as day, I can't remember the decisions that people took, but I can remember the way people behaved. And the people that were around me behaved when there was an assassination in Beirut, earthquakes in the Bahamas, and Haiti, there was a hurricane. It brings out the people who can rise to the occasion from the people who are intimidated by the occasion, the people who want to take responsibility to the people that shirk. We discussed as a management team, and our management team is it's kind of unique. There's a group of people that do not mix in any other walk of life. So we have air traffic controllers with retailers. We have accountants with the Coast Guard. We run the Coast Guard. We have HR professionals like Hannah in front of me, next to our port operations and our security guys. We discussed the importance that our decision making must be calm. People are going to lose their heads in the months ahead. It's kind of Michelle Obama put it a lot better than me. When they go low, we go high. And that's been the mantra throughout our dealing of the pandemic over the last 18 months. That's not to say there weren't some tricky questions along the way. I remember one of the team asking what would happen if the ferries carrying food couldn't operate, or if Lifeline Air Services couldn't fly so people couldn't get medical attention. No easy answers to that one. I describe that as purely looking into the abyss. And I think it's at times like that, one, you work out, well, that's not going to be good. That's what the answer is. But it helps you realise just how important our roles are. And I think those moments in your career where it's more than a company, it's actually how we service our island. And this will be one of the things that transcends the pandemic for us and for me. So 18 months on, I couldn't be prouder of the resilience and the adaptability that the Ports of Jersey team and our emergency services showed throughout the pandemic. We're in this together truly summed up our approach. We're going to ensure that we do everything we can to serve our island, and we would ensure the resilience of the island's lifeline, air and sea connectivity. But more than that, in a small community, we have guys that have lots of skills, and it's how would we redeploy those to, as the island required over the 18 months ahead. Just one anecdote from when you knew COVID-19 was not going to be like any other emergency. It was actually on the 15th of March, and this time it was clear that the pandemic, okay, all bets are off. We're in a new norm. The airport was actually operating as normal in the morning, but we had a flight coming in, bringing islanders home from Tenerife. There had been a COVID outbreak at a hotel on the island, and the public health team in Jersey, we'd picked up they were feeling a bit twitchy. The flight had already been delayed for 6 hours, and if anyone was on that flight, I really am sorry. And what we picked up is that the Spanish authorities didn't know what to do, and they didn't know whether they should allow this flight to leave with people who could have COVID on board. The flight did take off, but mid-air we heard from someone called Ivan Muscat, who I hadn't met, didn't know, not a Scooby-Doo who this guy was. And he instructed that the passengers needed to be quarantined. They couldn't mix with anyone on the island, and that anywhere that the passengers went would need to be deep cleaned and taken out of action. Within about 3 sentences, he'd effectively closed the airport if we allowed this one to land. It became really one of those business school challenges of, what the hell do you do? So how do you unload a plane full of passengers? How do you reunite them with their bags? How do you get them home safely without them coming into contact with anyone or anything? And of course, it was a cold and wet evening in March in Jersey. What followed was surreal. We were introducing new operational procedures within minutes. Those procedures were being relayed to the pilot on the aircraft whilst the aircraft was in flight. To say this is not normal doesn't sort of do justice to it. We managed to disembark passengers into a sealed room in which no one was allowed to enter, and everyone in the airport team had to wear full PPE. I mean, you can only imagine how unsettling it was for those islanders who were simply returning from their holiday. I spoke to the passengers over a microphone to try and explain what was happening and to provide reassurance. Now, the average age must have been 70, if they were a day, and I was met by the full range of and spectrum of responses, from the confused to the scared, and from the angry to the grateful. Now, remember, at this stage, we didn't know what COVID-19 really was, or what we were dealing with. To be standing shoulder to shoulder with our airport firefighters, with the operations team, custom officers, handling agents, the police and ambulance drivers, it was an incredibly proud feeling that you had, that you were standing next to people who didn't question their roles for a moment. They were solely motivated by serving their community and caring for disorientated and vulnerable passengers. So COVID-19 then started to impact the entire travel sector. And as restrictions were imposed, as we all know, demand completely collapsed. First EasyJet and then British Airways grounded their fleets. And then the Emergency Council and the emergency response on the island moved into gear. The scale of commitment I saw from those key agencies, from government officials and ministers, was impressive and humbling. They really did have the weight of the world on their shoulders. The days merged into each other, and our understanding of COVID-19 and its potential impact became clearer. Now, those of you who were here last month, or the Radisson, Paul Martin gave a really, really good speech, and he spoke of an island of 108,000 heroes. I really couldn't agree more. As the scenarios we began to model became ever more sobering, and their implications ever starker, the selflessness and the flexibility of those around me was incredible. During the crisis, Ports of Jersey redeployed, at any one point in time, up to a third of our workforce to help with the emergency response. We had firefighters that were driving ambulances when the ambulance service team became depleted. We had security officers, regular guys, who were helping to protect and provide additional customer care at the General Hospital. Our project management team coordinated the development of the Nightingale Hospital. We gave engineering support to the prison, which always struck me as a good idea. And our customer service team supported the COVID customer helpline. Every single redeployment was on a voluntary basis, without any form of arm twisting. Seriously, I couldn't have been prouder. So, we worked incredibly closely with business partners across the aviation and maritime community to ensure the resilience of the island's supply chains, to ensure that we were all fed. Every link of it was in distress. Lifeline air connectivity was provided first for the repatriation of islanders stuck overseas, for the movement of essential workers, to quickly move air freight, such as PPE and the blood sampling that we were undertaking overseas, and to ensure islanders could access medical treatment that was only available on the mainland. There has been moments when the public discourse around connectivity has really missed the point. At its heart, as Jennifer said, it is our lifeblood to the rest of the world. We also arranged for the island to provide a £10 million loan to facility for Blue Islands, a business case which is projected to have an economic benefit in excess of £600 million for the island over the next 10 years. It's a partnership that I'm extremely excited about. I'm really happy to welcome a few of the team from Blue Islands here today. But it's a potential to be a unique partnership that can deliver for the islands in the months and the year ahead. It's the kind of partnership that will be born out of the pandemic. And by the way, winter flights are on sale for Prague and Barcelona, so do fill your boots. We added resilience to our operations. We picked up things that we had no idea even took place. We had another slightly odd situation where we understood that the health department on the island had a contract for medical evacuation services. That company handed back the keys. So very, very quickly, it's how can we ensure the continuity of medical evacuations? And then we also had, on the completely other side, we were able to welcome the brilliant JP restaurants following the collapse of the casual dining group. In those weeks and months, I was able to build relationships that would have taken years in normal times. Those are relationships which endure now, and I hope into the future. So, by the time we got to June, with government, we'd explored how to reopen connectivity, using a testing regime that would keep the island safe. The same teamwork that built the Nightingale Hospital enabled us to build arrivals testing facilities at the airport and at the harbour within 2 weeks to create an amazing testing process and reconfigure the way that passengers arrive at the airport and the harbour. I must admit, I was seriously nervous on the first day. Was the system going to work? Were the inevitable queues going to lead to public disorder and feedback in the press? And would it be scalable as demand increased? Again, the reality was humbling. We had volunteers from across Ports of Jersey's team who never normally work in public-facing roles, welcoming passengers, answering all of their questions at both the airport and the harbour. The teamwork with Ali Mills, who, if you don't know her, I think she was is a nurse, but led the island's arrivals testing team, was just phenomenal, and she is a national treasure. But the thing that hit you most in those first few weeks as our connectivity and our borders reopened was the role that we play reconnecting people to their loved ones. The sheer joy as families were reunited, children seeing grandparents, parents who'd been working away unable to get home, and young couples seeing each other again for the first time in months. Seriously, every day felt like a scene from Love Actually. So August came, and to begin with, there was a naive feeling that it's all fine. And we began to see tourists again on the island, but of course COVID wasn't done yet. Since then, it's been like living in dog years, where every month feels like 6. The pandemic has been the gift that's kept giving, and we've also navigated our way through the first wave of impacts from Brexit. We've got to know the French fishermen much better than we ever did. We've helped Leslie and her amazing team at Durrell in a small way to save 3 species of reptile from extinction, of course. And we welcomed the British Lions, Bono, and a whole list of other celebrities. All topics with their own anecdotes, but for another time. And the rest, as they say, is history. But they also say what's past is prologue. Before I look to the future, I'd like to share a few reflections on the last 18 months and observations that give me confidence looking ahead. Firstly, I really can't imagine a better place to see out a pandemic. My wife Nancy and I feel incredibly lucky to have been living in Jersey with our young son, among such a warm community, and thank our lucky stars, we weren't living in a high-rise in Manhattan or Vancouver. 2, as an island, I think we've dealt pretty well with all that has been thrown at our community. The humanity, courage, dedication and compassion shown so clearly make me feel very proud to live here. We've shown that when the chips are down, we can collaborate, we can achieve things, and we can achieve things that perhaps we didn't think we could. The Nightingale Hospital, the arrivals testing, the vaccination rollouts just being a few examples, and there are many, many more. I'll go a bit further, that this is the 12th country I've had the pleasure of being involved in. And this is the best place to innovate that I've ever lived. The foundations are all here. The ability to get stakeholders together at the drop of a hat, internet speed to die for, an awesome quality of life, a low-tax environment, and a world-class finance industry. We also have so many inspirational people on our island, many of whom I've been lucky enough to meet and to get to know. So fast forward 18 months to today, and how is the world different? To be honest, I kind of like the way the world feels at the moment. Yeah, it's crazy, and the lack of certainty is unsettling for all of us at times, but it also feels incredibly human, as though there has been a reset on our lives, the things we value, and the way we prioritise what's important. And as I look at the opportunities and challenges ahead of us, we have some really, really big questions to answer. How would we like our post-pandemic world to feel? What are we going to carry forward to build back better? Should we work to get back to how things were, or pivot to a new and bolder future? Do we have the confidence to collaborate and innovate, to break down barriers and work together in the island's interests? And as the amazing Brené Brown says, and if you've not heard of her, you really should, do we have the courage and trust in each other to show up, to do the right things, even if we can't control the outcomes? For us at Ports of Jersey, like many of you, COVID was not an asteroid that hit and can now be seen in the rearview mirror. COVID will fundamentally change our business forever. The pandemic has had an unprecedented impact on the travel sector. More than 50 airlines have entered liquidation since the pandemic began, while those that survive have accumulated unprecedented levels of debt. I've just spent 3 days in Milan with the world's airlines, airports, investors and governments. The takeaways were clear. No airline has been immune, including those that serve Jersey. Further rationalisation in the sector is coming and further collapses are inevitable. There is simply no room for complacency regarding our connectivity. That said, I believe that we should continue to tackle the challenge head-on and with confidence. While the pandemic has had an enormous impact on Jersey's connectivity, the recovery in our passenger numbers is well ahead of the rest of the UK. We're now almost 70% of the way back to the same time in 2019, way ahead of the UK, who are still only at 45%. We have genuinely led the world in the way that our small island has combined our responsibility to protect our citizens with maintaining connectivity to the outside world. We've worked incredibly hard in close partnership with our carriers to seize opportunities and to manage risk. We've introduced more new airlines in a year than in the history of Jersey Airport, including Jet2, BA City Flyer, Logan Air and Eastern Airways. And we've also opened up new routes to the likes of Stansted, Corsica and Ibiza. We're also benefiting from direct connectivity to much more of the rest of the world, as British Airways has temporarily transferred its operation to Heathrow. But we need to do more. As an island, we need to be agile, we need to be decisive, and we need to be as competitive as we can possibly be. Airlines across the world are reassessing their networks, approaching their businesses from a startup perspective, with a clear focus on profitability and sustainability and not market share. Amid the uncertainty, though, there are opportunities. Our task with our stakeholders is to leverage that opportunity, to accelerate our recovery, and to do what's necessary to safeguard our strategic connectivity. At the same time, we're evolving at Ports, maturing, and forgive the pun, we're ready to spread our wings. We have a key role to play, not just in future-proofing our gateways, but also our island. Our agenda is rightly ambitious. Our aspirations for our island are high. Islanders deserve nothing less. We're on schedule for this year to be the biggest capital investment since our incorporation, but it's only the beginning of our plans to regenerate and transform the harbour. These are plans which we will continue to build with our stakeholders and the community in the coming months. But we need to modernise. We need to replace ageing infrastructure, but we need to unlock the potential of our harbour for all its stakeholders, creating a vibrant waterfront we can all be proud of. We need the flexibility to handle different modes of freight transport, to encourage and incentivise the use of much more environmentally friendly vessels. We need to enable the growth of our maritime industries. They need our support now more than ever before. We will work with the sector to play our part in developing a thriving blue economy, built on foundations that will ensure a sustainable future. We will link in with government's regeneration plans, bringing St Helier and the harbour together, investing significantly in our public realm, providing opportunities for the development of cultural destinations, and complementing key projects such as JDC's exciting waterfront development. And we want to deliver all these plans while being entirely self-financing and without creating a burden on taxpayers. At the same time, over at the airport, we're developing a new master plan for its short, intermediate and long-term goals and needs. We will cater for all passenger types and their future needs, harnessing new digital technologies that improve efficiency and enhance the travel experience, underpinned by a culture of care for every one of our passengers. A modern airport that captures the spirit of and the identity of our island. And we need to adapt our facilities and infrastructure to be ready for the next disruptor, and it's coming fast. Due to our geography, our route network, our regulatory framework, which I'll not bore you with, and having the shortest commercially viable flight I can think of anywhere in the world between the two islands, Jersey Airport is ideally suited to be the early introduction of new aircraft types, technologies and fuels. We're working now to position Jersey as an incubator for next generation aircraft, aviation and maritime technologies. And this isn't a fallacy, this is very, very doable. Connectivity is what islanders' lives are built on. And it's on what our economy depends. And the only thing I'd pick up from Jennifer's introduction earlier is it's not about the visitor economy. This is about our finance sector as well. You take away connectivity to Heathrow or to Gatwick. I'm not in the finance sector and I'm not one of the advisors, but it'll look like a very, very different room. We've got a lot to do, but we can do this. I'm frequently asked, what does the future look like for the travel sector? Will people want to travel in the same way in the future? This is where it gets a little bit philosophical, but I'll share my view. I am very, very confident that the future is bright. People will always want to travel. People like to travel, and people need to travel, especially to and from an island. Travel expands our understanding of the world and breaks down barriers and preconceptions. Our aspirations to live in an inclusive and diverse society depends on connectivity. Exploration is in our DNA. And connectivity is critical to Jersey's economy and islanders' quality of life, whether that's to visit friends and relatives, to access specialist medical care, as I touched on, or education, or simply to go on holiday and to work on business. And we depend on lifeline freight. We depend on it to be fed. We all suffer on the thankfully rare occasions that the weather means that the supermarket shelves aren't fully stocked and you can't find an avocado for love nor money. And while we navigate recovery waters, we also want to truly build back better. We'll meet head on the greatest challenge facing the travel sector: sustainability. It's arguably the toughest nut to crack, but the one with the greatest potential gain. Climate change and biodiversity loss are the most important battles of our time. For anyone in the travel industry, a conversation about the subject is never going to be an easy one. Heathrow call it the elephant in the airport. Kind of accurate. Every airport and harbour have a hugely important role to play, and we will play ours. We're finalising an ambitious and authentic sustainability plan to not only offset the emissions, the base camp, that Jersey's links create, but we need to go much, much further. We're looking at initiatives that will truly make an impact to our island and our planet, while also making a difference to our community that we serve. The way we tackle sustainability will define the way in which we at ports interact with the world in the future. From decarbonising travel to enhancing biodiversity, from the way we undertake construction to the way we champion a sustainable future for our visitor and blue economies, From the way we strive to create a sense of belonging where our teams and partners feel safe to be their best versions of themselves, and to the way we push ourselves each day to better serve our community. I couldn't be more excited by the challenge and the scale of the innovation that will be required from all of us. So I'll leave you waiting and hopefully wanting to hear more. But also, we'll tell you about how we need all of you to play a part, so please do be ready. With that, thank you, and thanks for listening.
Matt, thank you very much indeed. Do stay where you are because the inevitable questions will follow, of course. And it's no wonder straight away why it was a sold-out room. Great speech, inspiring. Thank you. There will be questions in the room, and if there are, please raise a hand. We'll get a microphone to you as quickly as possible, and we'll make sure that your question is fired. We've got one straight away from Robert Mackenzie. Robert.
Matt, good afternoon.
Hey, Robert.
First of all, as the operator of the flight from Tenerife on the 15th of March, I too can remember having various conversations with this chap I'd never heard of before called Ivan Muscat, who I have to say was extremely helpful. And first of all, I'd just like to say thank you to you and your team for the way in which you handled what was a brand new challenge in such a professional way. So thank you. Let's pray we don't have the same issues with our Tenerife flights this winter. Available to book online.
Anyone?
Seriously though, my question is, do you believe that the connectivity, capacity and frequency of flights next summer will be higher, the same or lower than 2021?
I think a few things, first up is 2021 and 2020 haven't been that different for us so far. So it was only in the last month that year-on-year passenger numbers are actually slightly higher. And you think, okay, yeah, we had 5 months without any passengers at all. I think the challenge that we have is we're rebuilding and recovering better than I expected. So we, as you can imagine, high, medium and low scenarios, and we're above the high scenario at the moment. But the question we ask ourselves, does that reflect underlying demand for Jersey? Or is it because we've been the only game in town for the UK common travel area? I'll give my personal view right now, and I'll reserve the right to change my mind in 3 months' time. I think that the industry is projecting that we'll get back to 2019 levels in 2024. I'm working to bring it forward from that. But I think that's the kind of challenge that we're talking about. There's no overnight quick fixes here. I think based on the dialogue that we are undertaking daily with the airlines, we are a lot closer than I think we ever were. And commercially, we're at the table now in a way that perhaps we weren't. So assuming there's no 4th, 5th, 6th waves, I think 2022 will be higher. It's not going to be where I'd like. I think it's really going to be 23 that we really start seeing anything that would feel akin to normal. But at that point, I want us to be opening up Europe as well as the UK.
Thank you. We'll take more questions from the floor in just a second. Just want to pick up on the question, and we'll come to the politician. It'll be a long question in just a second. Just going further on the tourism angle.
Yep.
We've been reading a lot about hotels closing, large hotels closing, small hotels closing, the amount of beds. I think Robert wrote about it in the JP recently. Is that a concern for you, bed stock on hotels? Because that surely must have an effect on what you do.
It is. It's a real concern as well. To share, in my career, I've never been in a scenario where airlines and ferry operators are asking whether there's going to be enough hotel stock, bed stock, for them to deliver the programs that they want to deliver. They are extremely nervous that we as an island are going to price ourselves out of being competitive as a destination. And it won't be the flights or the crossings to get here. We can actually leverage our position there. But if it's significantly more expensive to have 4 days here than a week in Malaga or Alicante, we've got an issue. My perspective would be this is something that we've got to attack strategically. Now, Claire and Amanda and the teams working with industry, they've got their hands full here. There isn't a quick fix that I can see. And the challenges for family-owned hoteliers, I really, really appreciate. But we need a strategic vision for what's our bed stock going to look like in 3, 5, 7, 9 years' time. And I know we would use it's not core to our business, but we would develop hotels rather than there not be any hotels on the island, because that will kill our connectivity.
Sorry, when you say we will develop, do you mean ports?
Yep. It's that important.
Is that on the table?
Absolutely.
Or is that in your thoughts?
Sorry, am I going to go and build it myself? No.
Yeah.
Would I use our land to go and bring in one of the stronger brands or develop something like this amazing place? Absolutely. And I think actually the impression I get is there is significant demand from potential hoteliers to develop, to expand. We need to remove the obstacles that make it impossible to do so, but wrapped in the framework of a tourism strategy that is aspirational, that is really looking at this sustainable future for our tourism economy, rather than, I'll be a bit harsh here, how do we avoid anyone else going out of business? That isn't the way.
A strategy. Thank you, Matt. Thank you for answering that. I've got Kirsten Morell down here. Deputy Morell.
Thank you. It's just thank you, Matt. That's really interesting. But it's just to touch on you touched on pricing then, and I was wondering how you see post-pandemic flight pricing, which direction is it going to go in, and how do you think it will affect islanders and then people visiting the island?
I think it's a really, really cool question. The way the airlines have survived is by taking on debt. So if you look at BA's parent company, IAG, they've now got more than £11.5 billion worth of debt on their balance sheet. EasyJet's taken on £4.5 billion, and a couple of weeks ago completed a £1.4 billion rights issue, so tapping its own equity. I think that debt is going to need to be dealt with, and naturally you'd think they're going to start pushing up prices. The problem is the market won't take it because demand is so elastic. So if they put up prices, people won't fly. Their response is going to be they will stop flying marginal routes. They will only fly the real profitable routes. And kind of Jersey's in a funny place there. We're not a hub. And we all think that we're the center of our universe, but we're a spoke in big hub operations. So when I say the need for us to be competitive, to create the environment and the conditions commercially that the airlines want to fly here, it really is paramount. But I don't see the risk being more expensive flights because they'll just go somewhere else.
More questions? Questions from the floor? Any more questions from the floor? If not, I've got another one. We've got two at the moment. We'll take this one here. Mike behind you.
Thank you. Hi, Matt.
Hey.
You touched on biodiversity in the new airports and harbours, etc. Would you be looking to spend that money locally on local biodiversity, or spending it somewhere else in the world, planting forests, etc.?
And I'll not reveal too much because we're going to put our strategy out there in the next month or two. And it's something I'm incredibly proud of. I think there's kind of going to be a mixture. That on the one hand, when you look at scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions, actually the scope 1 emissions, the emissions that Ports of Jersey themselves create, it's quite easy to get your head around that in the relatively short future. Our challenge is 2 and 3, in particularly scope 3, which is the airlines and the ferry operators. I think that kind of said, so if we need to offset in the first instance, how will we go about doing that, and what's the right scheme that we would look to? I'm not going to look at that lady from Durrell in the room, but they've got a cracking scheme, and if anyone else isn't signed up to it, maybe you should. But we also have a kind of de facto responsibility for the oceans. And a number of times as we've built our sustainability strategy, we do find ourselves asking, if we don't do it, who's going to do it? And so that responsibility for the maritime sector, if that's to be its champion, or if that's to help in the economics that transforms it from, news stories that are fishermen at loggerheads with each other, how do we create a more sustainable future when that is our one natural asset that this island has got? I find it inconceivable that we're not going to be investing on island.
Okay, more questions coming in, and there was another hand raised over here. Just get down to you. Get that question asked.
Literally the other side of the room.
Matt,
Yeah.
Thanks so much for that talk. That was really, really interesting. I was very interested in the little snippet in the middle about decarbonisation, and you said fuel types. So do you mean electric planes?
The technologies are emerging, and it's not clear at this stage what the dominant technology is going to be. So the transitions, I think, will be sustainable aviation fuels first, so biofuels, which I don't think are really a long-term answer, whilst the technologies are being developed that will provide the long-term solution. If you want a personal opinion, I think it'll be hydrogen. And hydrogen, EasyJet have made commitments that 2032, their like-for-like replacement with hydrogen is where they see the future being, and they're going to bypass this sustainable aviation fuel, biofuel phase. But nobody really knows. The most exciting thing I think I can say is, and I say this as a little bit of a hippie at heart, that the penny has dropped with the industry. And rather than a growth profile that will last forever, and you kind of bear in mind that less than 20% of the world's population has ever been on a flight. So the demand to fly is only going to go up. But they're looking at, the nature of it is how quickly can we decarbonize? And the first one that decarbonizes is going to have such a competitive advantage over the rest. So 2 years ago, BA were the first airline globally to say, we are going to decarbonize, and they said by 2050. EasyJet are now down to 2032, and it's also almost becoming a bidding war, and we can play a role in this.
Yeah. Okay. Hydrogen. So because the Piker prop planes are electric. Have you seen those?
There are
short hops. Right, so
electrics,
I
hybrids.
You might go electric, but hydrogen. Okay. All right.
We need to support, and as an island, we need to support all the technologies.
Right, okay.
But it's too early to tell which one will be the dominant.
Cool. Thanks.
No one's mentioned ferries.
Yeah.
And I just wondered, when you look in that future, you talked about carbon neutral and all sorts of other bits and pieces, and you talked about the flights mostly, because we synonymously think of ports with the airport, but of course our harbours are really important to us.
Yeah.
Do you see our ferry operation being looking very much as it looks now in 2 or 3 years' time? Do you see it changing? And I'm not particularly meaning operators, but you must be looking at that as a model and thinking, is that right? Is that where we want to be?
The operation has to evolve. So it's not so much about carbon, it's SOx and NOx, for those in the room that understand it, with ferries. The same issue with emerging technologies on the ferry side is coming. I mean, the opportunity or the better position for the island is we do have a monopoly as an island. Condor exists to serve, they do it well, and we depend on them, but there's not the constant threat of they're going to start sailing to Cherbourg instead of to the Channel Islands. But completely living in denial to think that that fleet is going to be the same in a number of years' time. Same issue. The technology that can manage the waters between here and the UK, it needs to be quite sturdy. So whilst you will see in the likes of British Columbia in Scandinavia, there are hydrogen vessels. That's unproven at the moment, but our time horizon is we think that's 5 to 7 years away. It takes 3 years to build a new boat. And I think the questions that we will need to ask ourselves as an island, do we want to be an early adopter on unproven technologies and have the decarbonising benefits earlier? or do we wait for the market to mature and have greater confidence? There's some big stuff that we need to think about.
Okay, easy question for you. You talked about
Thank God.
inspiration earlier on.
Yes.
You talked about inspiring people, and you were very generous about Jersey and your time in Jersey from the start. So who inspires you? Who are you talking about when you say people that inspire you?
I think, number one, it's not the usual suspects, but it's not been a usual 18 months, has it? You know, and I think we can all look back on our careers and who are those people that you thought were just brilliant? And, you know, when I grow up, I'm going to be like them. I think this year has been somewhat different, but I also think it's going to typify the kind of relationships and partnerships that we're all going to have in the future. So without embarrassing people, you know, why would I do that? The guys at Durrell inspire the hell out of me. They are so purpose-driven on what they want to do for the future. Got a young lady who's smiling and going to go red in a second, but the Recovery College, you know, what they're doing for mental health, we were a partner with them because we were concerned about the mental health of our staff. They have programs which, you know, they take the trite from it's okay not to feel okay, but what are the tools that we need to look after our own mental health, but our teams need to look after their family's mental health. You know, also you can bring that best version of yourself to work. And, you know, I was lucky enough to go to the Pride Awards, and some of the people that stood up there, you know, that humanity that I see right now, that's what we need to feed into how we do business going forward. And I think, you know, what's the single most important ingredient in the Ports brand going forward? It'll be trust. And I think trust will be defined by the people that we work with as much as the way we undertake our role ourselves.
I think we are incredibly out of time because we said 2:15, and we must be past that by now. Would you please help me in thanking Matt Thomas?
Thank you, Matt. Thank you to everyone who's come. I know you will all want to rush back to work as quickly as you can, be that the spare bedroom or the office. Goodness knows where you are these days. You will see on the screens our next chamber lunch, not too far away from here. It's exactly this room next time round. And our guest speaker is the Minister for Treasury and Resources, Deputy Susie Pinnell. We have, of course, a government plan coming up. There's always a budget to be reconciled, and there might be some coffers needed. And who's going to pay for it all? We'll find out more at the next lunch. Those tickets are on sale now, thanks to BWCI for sponsoring that. If you buy a table of 10 or 12 in some cases, it does mean, of course, that you get your own table with your own sign on it and you get a reserved seat, and the networking tables will be around for those individuals that wish to. So that is our next lunch. I thank you very much indeed for coming along today. Thank you to all of our supply sponsors as well. We mentioned them, I think, earlier on, but Danelle sponsored the wine. Thank you very much, Danelle, for doing that as always. Thank you to Ozif, who've done the videos, and it will be on YouTube within about 2 days, the speech. There will be a copy of the speech sent to everyone that bought tickets, so you'll get a copy of that. So if you want to relive some of those great highlights from Matt, you'll have those as well. There is photos that were taken today that will be in Connect magazine, and there's a copy of Connect magazine outside that you wish to pick up. I think I've mentioned just about everyone who I've forgotten. Photo reportage are taking the photos as well, so thank you very much indeed to them. It takes an awful lot of people to pull together one lunch for 200 people. If you've ever had a dinner party for 6, you'll know what my last couple of days have been like. But without the support of our team and of all of our sponsors, we can't do it. So thanks to Carrie Olsen for being our sponsors today. We really appreciate it. Have a great week, what's left of it, and we look forward to seeing you at the next lunch. Thank you very much.